Like turning pages of an old album, the doors of the College of William and Mary are opened, carrying us into the past as we look down the Duke of Gloucester Street toward the Colonial Capital nearly a mile distant. Before we visit this restored city of Williamsburg, named in honor of King William III of England, we stroll upon the campus of the second oldest college in America. In front of us, we see the original academic building, named in honor of Sir Christopher Wren, who designed it in the 17th century. In this old house on the campus lives the college president. The Bruton Building, the first school for Indians in America. To harmonize with the older buildings, colonial architecture has been adapted to the new dormitories and halls. Along the first block of Duke of Gloucester Street, the main thoroughfare of Williamsburg, commercial buildings in colonial style have been erected, some with brick salvaged from old demolished structures to give a pleasing appearance of age. In restoring Williamsburg to its original appearance, all houses not authentically of that period were demolished. Those dating from colonial days, which were in need of repair, were restored, and many important structures which had disappeared entirely were re-erected. Thus, Williamsburg today is the only city in America that appears as it did when England ruled in Virginia. Behind this front is one of the finest little theaters in the world. This might be an old colonial mansion, but see what it really is, a chain grocery shop. Even the signs are in keeping with the restored city. Not all the shops are in the business area. Some are located in the residential district and housed in small structures harmonizing with the surroundings. The original apothecary of Dr. Blair is preserved as a museum. The modern fire department occupies a reconstructed building. The modest but up-to-date courthouse. On one side is a strong modern jail. On the other is the public library. Across the square is the attractive old courthouse, now used as an archive. Nearby is the original powder magazine that figured so prominently in the Revolution, when Governor John Murray, the Earl of Dunmore, had the contents removed, an act that precipitated the outbreak of the Revolution in Virginia. Bruton Parish Church, the principal place of worship and claimed to be the oldest Episcopal church in America, was erected in 1710 to replace an earlier church that became inadequate when the seat of England's colonial government was moved from Jamestown to Williamsburg. Among the old buildings which still stand is the Wythe House, home of the first professor of law in America. Across the street is the former residence of St. George Tucker, who succeeded Professor Wythe at William and Mary. In this little house lived William Lethingstone. Behind the white fence is the site where in 1716 he erected the first theater in the New World. In the process of turning back the pages of history to colonial days, 458 structures were demolished and all evidence of modern life removed. In addition, gardens of that early era were laid out and planted precisely as they had been at that time. When this was accomplished, Williamsburg once again began to assume the aspect it had as capital of the Virginia colony. The three most important structures were completely re-erected, as the originals at various times had been destroyed by fire. One is the Raleigh Tavern. The present building is an exact reproduction of the tavern which stood on this site. Named in honor of Sir Walter Raleigh, the man who sponsored the first attempt to colonize Virginia, it was the outstanding hostelry of its day. With an atmosphere of dignity and elegance, it compared favorably in all but size to fine hotels of America today. Rendezvous of leading people, patronized by the governor and other leaders of the colonies, and visited by important persons from England, it was the center of activities, and in it were held many balls and other brilliant social functions which made it popular and widely known. The Colonial Capital, the second of the three important restored buildings, stands at the end of Duke of Gloucester Street. In a 17th century coach are carried the guides who are employed to conduct visitors through the public buildings. These guides, all of whom are women, are called hostesses. and in harmony with their surroundings are dressed in style reminiscent of colonial days. After the seat of government had been moved in 1699 from Jamestown to Williamsburg, the erection of the beautiful capital was started, and it was formally opened 6 years later. The first structure was destroyed by a disastrous fire in 1747 and had to be rebuilt. The second was also burned. In it, until 1779, met the Assembly of Virginia, and here were enacted some of the outstanding events of American history. The Union Jack still flies a light that so many times witnessed the acts and the results of speeches which changed the course of history. In the right wing, Patrick Henry made his impassioned plea for the repeal of the Stamp Act, and here were adopted the resolutions which called upon the Continental Congress at Philadelphia to declare the colonies free and independent of England. The replica of the historic building now stands as a silent monument to its glorious past. The most important reconstructed building is the Governor's Palace. It stands at the head of the Palace Green, which is about halfway along the Duke of Gloucester Street. In colonial days, this beautiful green, 200 feet wide, never failed to evoke favorable comment. The palace, residence of the governors, was the largest and most luxuriously furnished building in America. More than 15,000 pounds, equivalent to 5 times that amount today, was appropriated and spent upon its construction and repair. In making the estate the most magnificent in the colonies, many thousands of pounds from private sources were also spent, as well as the revenue from a 2-shilling tax on every hogshead of tobacco exported. The social life at the palace was in keeping with the grandeur of the estate, and it was claimed to have been unequaled in America and surpassed in England only by the royal court. Visitors are conducted through the palace and outhouses by the hostesses. The kitchen court is a particular place of interest. Here is the old well, and right next to it is the salt house. From the kitchen court, a path leads down through the vegetable garden to the fish pond, an artificial lake entirely within the palace enclosure. We can perhaps better understand the importance of the colony of Virginia when we know that it comprised in territory what are today 8 states: Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Illinois, an area exceeding 355,000 square miles, or more than the present combined area of the British Isles, France, Belgium, Switzerland, and Austria. The top of the mound over the old ice house affords a splendid point from which to view the rear of the gardens and the palace. The landscape aspect of the gardens are faithful reproduction of the originals, and we may wander through them at our leisure and admire the artistic designs of those who first laid them out. The box garden adjoins the Revolutionary burial ground, where 158 soldiers who died while the palace was being used as a hospital are buried. Stately tree box add dignity and age to the present grounds as they did to those of earlier days. While Williamsburg was the seat of the Virginia government, the palace served as residence for 9 governors, 7 English and 2 American. Governor Spotswood was the first English governor to occupy the mansion when it was completed in 1710. John Murray, Earl of Dunmore, the last. Patrick Henry was the first American governor. Thomas Jefferson, the second, resided in it until the seat of government of the Commonwealth of Virginia was moved to Richmond in 1779. 2 years later, during the Yorktown campaign, and while it was being used as a hospital, the palace was destroyed by fire. The idea of restoring Colonial Williamsburg originated with one man and was made possible through the generosity of another, who defined it as an endeavor to restore accurately and to preserve for all time an important city of America's colonial period.